Welcome to our session on how to use Power BI with Project Online. My name is Patricia Davidson with Avalon Training Group. Avalon is a division of Agora Consulting Partners. So what are we going to cover in this session? BI reporting is a pretty broad term, and there's a number of report authoring tools that I teach in my 2-day BI reporting class for Project Server. When we talk about an authoring tool, that's a tool that someone from the project office or IT, if IT staff are familiar with the data sets, because what we really want is a power user of Project Server, or in this case, Project Online, that understands the data for building a report. So just reading through this list, we've got Microsoft Excel 2010 or 2013, both of which will connect to Project Online to build a report. There are some add-ons that can be enabled within Excel. One is PowerPivot for Excel, available in both 2010 and 2013. And PowerPivot enhances some of the pivot table capabilities within Excel. Then there's an add-on called Power Query for 2010 and 2013 Excel. And Power Query allows you to build a data model from multiple tables within Project Online. And then we have an add-on called Power View, which is available only in Excel 2013. And Power View is used to build a lot of visualizations from the data. And I'll go through a couple of examples on the types of reports that you could build with any one of these three add-ons. And then as part of the SharePoint platform, there is Microsoft PerformancePoint Dashboard Designer. That's primarily used for building scorecards and dashboards. But I want you to think of a dashboard as just multiple report objects on the same page. So it's not to say you couldn't build a dashboard or Excel with the add-ons like PowerPivot and Power View. And finally, the newest authoring tool that Microsoft has come out with is called the Power BI Desktop. And that's what we're going to focus on in this session. The Power BI Desktop allows you to create report objects that are similar to the visualizations I talked about within Power View. In addition, Microsoft has a cloud service that allows us to publish those reports to a hosted environment. So Power BI has two components: the cloud-based service that enables users to view these visual reports, and the desktop authoring tool. So the desktop application is a free application you can install right onto your own computer. And as part of this application, you can connect to your data source and build a data model to base your report off of. Then you can publish that out to the Microsoft hosted service to allow users to view those reports. I've included a couple links here. One is an article which gives answers to frequently asked questions, and the other one is an article that gives some information on the pricing of the cloud-based service. Now, since this course is going to focus on using the Power BI desktop tool for authoring reports, I thought it would be nice to display a sample of some of the other types of reports you would create using the other authoring tools. So here's a simple Excel report. It's giving us a status report on milestones. And one of the nice things that you can do within Excel is you can have something called a slicer, which is like an interactive filter. And Excel 2013 has a timeline slicer. So if I wanted to see all of the milestones that were coming up in the next quarter, let's August, September, October, then I could highlight these 3 months in the timeline slicer, and the entire report would be filtered for those 3 months. I also have with Excel the conditional formatting capability that has been around for a long time, So if I have data within my report that I wanted to show some highlighting or some symbols, then I could apply some conditional formats to achieve that. Now, if I have the PowerPivot add-on within Excel, that allows me to do a little bit more within my pivot table. For example, I can define key performance indicators or KPIs, and within those KPIs, I can have the parent record roll up with a value that's based on the child values. Using PowerPivot, I can also add formula fields right into my pivot table. Now, I can do basic formulas without the PowerPivot add-on, but the PowerPivot add-on gives me more robust capabilities for building those formulas. Looking at another example, this report was built using the PowerView add-on. And the PowerView add-on, one of the advantages that offers is some additional visualizations that might not be available within my standard Excel charting capabilities. And I have the ability to make these visualizations interactive. For example, if I've got a pie that's breaking down the number of issues I have by the prioritization, high, medium, or low, I could click on the pie slice and all the other charts on this page would be filtered based on that slice. So if I click on the green slice for high, then I see the next pie chart, which is giving me a breakdown by category, will show me the count of my issues broken down by category, and it would show me which projects have high priority issues associated with them. So the last example I have here is a dashboard that was built, PerformancePoint. So PerformancePoint is part of your SharePoint licensing. So it's a free download, and you can connect PerformancePoint to your project data and then build charts or tables or scorecards using the PerformancePoint Dashboard Designer. The formatting capabilities are not as rich as what we would find in Excel, but I want to point out that one thing you can do with your PerformancePoint dashboards is you can right-click on a section of a chart and open something called a decomposition tree. So essentially giving you a drill down with more detail about that data element. Now this session is going to focus on the Power BI desktop authoring tool and how to publish a dashboard created in Power BI to the cloud Power BI service. As a report author, when you launch the Power BI desktop, you will have the option to get data from many different sources. And if you're a Project Online user, you will access the data using something called the OData feed. It's a web-based open protocol that allows you to access the data using a browser. The data from the project database is fed to this web-based protocol. So once you've pulled your data into the Power BI desktop, you can build a report and then publish that report to the Power BI service. I'm going to be going through a demonstration on how to do this, but I want to go through the steps at a high level. Step 1 is connecting with the external data source. And when you connect with the external data source, you're going to put in the URL for that OData feed. Step 2 would be to build your data model. And building a data model involves using something called the Desktop Query Editor. So you can filter out records that you're not interested in. You could build formulas that takes a variance between two existing fields. So once you've built that data model, you can use the data model to create your report. You can save the report in the Power BI desktop file format, which is an extension PBIX, or you can publish that to the Microsoft Power BI cloud. So let's get started with a demo of the Power BI desktop. I'm launching the Power BI desktop that was previously downloaded and installed on my workstation. In the Startup window, I can select Get Data. From the Get Data dialog, select Other Data Types, and then select OData Feed. As soon as I click Connect, I'll be prompted for the URL of my OData feed. The URL will consist of the name of your tenant /sites/pwa/_API/project data. When I click OK, it's now going to connect to the OData feed. And I now see a list of tables or views that are available. To build a report on project data, I'll select the Projects table. And if I wanted to bring in any baseline data for comparison, I can add the Project Baselines table as well. Once my tables are selected, I'll go ahead and click Load. When prompted for the authentication or sign on, choose the organizational account that you've been assigned, and then click Connect. As soon as you're connected to the data, your Power BI desktop will take you into the modeling view, which allows you to see a list of records that are available. As you scroll to the right through this table, you can see there are quite a few fields, many of which you may not be planning to use in your current report. So another option when connecting to your data is to be a little more specific as to which fields you'd like to include in your data model. To be a little more specific on which fields you would like to include in your query, I'll open up a new window of my Power BI desktop. And when I click Get Data, I'll follow the same steps before, select Other, select OData Feed, Connect, and this time I'm going to type in a long URL which includes a select statement identifying which fields I would like to include. Now, I just so happen to have this typed up in one of our slides. So rather than typing it in here, I'm going to copy and paste it from the slide deck right here into the dialog. So in the slide deck, when we connected to the entire feed, I typed in the name of our tenant, sharepoint.com/sites/pwa_API project data. Now I'm going to include an additional statement that identifies from the projects table, I'd like to select the following fields: project ID, project name, project actual work, project start date, finish date, last modified date, some work fields, cost fields, and then some custom fields. All of my custom fields have ABC as an acronym at the beginning of the field. So there are about 4 or 5 custom fields that I'm also including in this URL. So I'll copy the complete URL, navigate back to my Power BI desktop, and paste. I'll click OK to initiate the connection. So the first pop-up shows me a sampling of data. Once I click Load, it'll do a complete load on all of the data. Notice in the Power BI desktop on the right, instead of giving me the name of the table, the desktop is displaying Query 1. So if I click on that, I can see a list of all of the fields that are included in this latest query. Using my right click, I can rename this to project data hyphen specific fields. Using the shortcuts on the left, I can navigate to the table and preview my data. So now I have a much smaller data set that I'm working with to build my data model. I can continue to build my model by adding calculated fields. On the modeling ribbon, I've got a new column icon, which allows me to create a new column within the model. My new column is going to be a calculation taking the custom field ABC budget and subtracting the native project server field project cost. If I just start typing ABC, it's going to scan through the list of fields available in this model and give me all the fields that start with ABC. So I'll select this ABC budget field and then type the minus sign and start typing the word project for project cost. And it gives me all the fields that start with PRO, so I'll select project cost. And notice the syntax. Before the field, it's putting in the name of the table that I assigned, project data hyphen specific fields. So I'll go ahead and click the check mark, and that column is now added to our model. And you'll see there's a calculation that's been applied. And so in some cases, my projects are over budget, and other cases they're under budget. To change the format, I can also use my formatting section of the ribbon and select the format type. In this case, currency general. Will apply a currency symbol to that column. I can also right-click and rename the column. Starting with ABC tells me it's a custom field that I've created, and I'll call it budget variance. Another thing that's useful in a data model is to change the format of some of the existing columns. So if you look at some of the date fields, like the project finish date, I have the year, month, day, as well as the time of day. So I may want to change the format of this field so it only includes the date. And likewise for the project start and the project modified date. Project modified date is a handy one for reporting because it gives me an indication on the last time the schedule was updated by the project manager. So we've just been working in the query editor and the modeling capabilities to build our data set. Now we're going to move to the report canvas, which starts off as a blank page, and we'll start to build our report. When building a new report, you may want to have a company logo displayed on the report page. Using the Home ribbon in the Power BI desktop, I can insert an image and then shrink the image and position it to the appropriate spot on the page. I can also insert a text box with a heading, PMO Portfolio Summary Report, and select the text to enlarge the font and change the font style. Then I'll reposition this to the top of the page. Now I'll start adding some visualizations to the report. I'll start by taking the ABC budget and moving that to the report page, and then take the ABC sponsor and drop that in the same section so it gives me a breakdown of the budget by sponsor. If I display this as a funnel visualization and increase the size This gives me a nice perspective on what sponsors within the organization have the greatest amount of funding. To remove all of the projects that have a blank value on the sponsor, using the filter panel on the right-hand side, I can choose all sponsors except blank. So that changes the balance within my funnel. As part of the same report, I'd like to see the ABC budget summarized by funding source. And I'd like to see this as a breakdown in a pie chart. So this shows me what portion of my budget is being spent on operations, capital, external projects, etc. In this chart, I may also want to remove any projects that have a blank value for the funding source. So let's throw one more visualization onto this report. How about the ABC budget broken down by program, and display that as a tree map, which is similar to a pie in that it shows proportions. Let's remove any projects that don't have a value for the program field. You also have the ability to filter all three visualizations with the same setting using a page level filter. Notice that each visualization object has a title which includes the name of the fields that are plotted. When your report is complete, you can use the File menu to save the file as a PBIX file format. So I'll use the name PMO Portfolio Summary. You can also publish this to your Power BI site. Let's open the Portfolio Summary report in Power BI. We'll be required to log in with a valid account in order to see this new report in the cloud. This is added to the Power BI site along with any other previous reports or dashboards that have been published. All of the visualizations in this report are interconnected. So if I wanted to see what the breakdown in funding source and programs for any projects for the Chief of Staff, once I select that project sponsor, you'll see it shows me the portion of the funding source for external, capital, and operating, and also the portion for the programs that apply to the Chief of Staff. So any of the sponsors, as I select the sponsor, it will fade out the sections of the pie and tree map that don't apply. The same would hold true if I wanted to see all the capital projects and what sponsors have capital projects. So I'll use the funding source capital, and then it filters the appropriate sponsors and just highlights the portion that applies to capital projects. Returning to our Power BI desktop, I'll now demonstrate how we can build an additional page of reports in the same file. Notice along the bottom, I've got a plus sign that allows me to add a second page and a third page, etc. each page is connected to the same data model that we created in our first report. If there's anything I wanted to change in the data model, I can use my Edit Queries on the Home ribbon to open the query editor. Using the query editor, I can use the New Source icon and add an additional OData feed and enter the URL. Reviewing my list of tables available, I'm going to add the Issues table as a new query. There's no need for me to rename this table, so I'll close the query editor and apply the changes. Once I'm back on my reporting canvas, I can now build a new report, and if you'll notice on the right-hand side, I have two data tables to choose from: my custom project data specific fields and the additional data table that I've just added, which gives me a list of all issues by project. In this next example, I'll build a report that is more of a tabular type report with cost information. I'll start by listing the name of the project, then I'll add the ABC budget, the project cost, and our calculated field, budget variance, which takes the original budget number, which was entered as metadata to the project, subtracts the current project cost, and gives me a variance. In the visualizations, you'll notice it's defaulted to setting this up as a table. I'll expand the size of the table, and then to the right, I'm going to summarize my cost variances by sponsor. So I'll take the ABC sponsor and then place the budget variance. And I'd like to see this displayed as a funnel. You'll notice by default, it's giving me a count of how many projects assigned to each sponsor. Off to the right, under the Values section, I can click the down arrow and choose Sum. The next thing I'm going to do is add something called a slicer. This is something that's also available in Excel. It's an interactive filter that I can set up based on one of my available fields. So if I wanted to filter this by funding source, I'll drop funding source onto the report, then I'll change that visualization object to a slicer. The slicer's displaying checkboxes, which allows me to toggle which funding sources I'm interested in analyzing. Or I can select all, and it gives me a list of all projects. Now, if I'm only interested in projects that have a cost of greater than 0, then I'll select the left-hand table, and under my visual filters, I'll change the filter for project cost is greater than 0. Once the filter is applied, only projects with a cost greater than 0 appear on the report. So I'll choose a couple of funding sources to filter my project. And the last thing I'll do is add a heading for the top of the report. Cost analysis by funding source. Once I've completed the second page of the report, I'll use my Save button. And then republish the report back to my Power BI. I'll have to replace the old data set with this new data set. I'm back out in Power BI looking at my new report. At the bottom, you'll see multiple tabs allowing me to navigate between the pages in the report. I have other navigational capabilities such as making the report full screen, collapsing the left-hand panel. I can also return to the edit mode on the report using the Edit Report shortcut. Now that we've explored a couple of examples in the Microsoft Power BI desktop and publishing that to the Power BI cloud service, I'd like to circle back and touch on connecting to your Project Online data using Excel. Let's go through the basic concept of connecting to your Project Online data using Excel. The same OData feed is going to be your data source within Excel. So as a report author, you will launch Excel, open up a blank workbook, and then connect to your data source using the URL for your OData feed. Once you've built the report, you can publish that report to your business intelligence reporting site, which is a subsite below PWA. So all your PWA viewers who have permissions on that subsite will be able to see those reports. So we'll do one short demo on how to connect to Project Online using Excel. I've launched Excel and I'll open a blank workbook. On the data ribbon, under the Get External Data Sources, I'll select from Other Sources and then choose from OData Feed. I'll type out the URL, which is the https://thetenant.sharepoint.com/sites/pwa/_API/project data. If I progress to the next step, I'll be prompted to put in my credentials. So at my administrator account on this tenant is admin@avalon student, and I'll now type in the password. And once I'm authenticated, I can select the tables that I'd like to include in this query. Since we did a report on project information last time, let's do an example on resources. So I'm going to select the resources, their time phase data set, along with the task time phase data set, and any assignments, and the assignments time phase data set. So what this does is it gives me the complete data set that would be required if I wanted to analyze what assignments were given to a resource and what their remaining availability is. As I advance to the next step, the data connection wizard is coming up with a name for this new Office Data Connection file that's going to be created. I can accept the default name or type in a custom name, such as resource assignment multiple tables.odc. And then I'll click Finish. And from the Import Data dialog, I'll select Pivot Table Report. So once you've been authenticated to view the data, you can build your pivot table the same way you'd build a pivot table in any Excel report. I'll build a simple list with resource names, but I'm only interested in named work resources, so I'll filter based on the type description. And I'll just select resources, which are work resources. Then I'll add their maximum availability into the values column, the standard rate, apply some basic formatting to clean up the look of the table. I can change the settings of the fields, such as the title. So if instead of calling this sum of resource max units, I'll just call it max units. And instead of sum of the resource standard rate, I'll just refer to that as the standard rate. And I'll make some adjustments to the columns. If I do that, by the way, I should go into my pivot table options and remove the checkbox on autofit column width on update. So if I take the time to adjust my columns, I don't want it to keep updating to the old column width. Now, if I am producing a report in Excel, I like to turn off the grid lines in the background and the headings, so it doesn't look as much like an Excel grid. And then to save this back to my PWA Power BI site, I'm going to go into my Backstage menu, File, select Save As. I'm saving it to SharePoint, and the URL for my project online needs to be entered. So if I click Browse, I can click in the address bar and type in the proper URL. So that's my HTTPS, and then it's the same, it's the tenant.sharepoint.com/sites/PWA, and the subsite for my BI reporting center is /PWA reports. So once I've selected that URL, I can give the report a name, such as work resources, and then click Save. Let's close Excel. And return to our PowerPoint slide deck to review a couple points that I mentioned earlier about building reports in Excel. There are several add-ins that improve the capabilities of building nice visual reports within Excel. There is an add-in called Power Query, which allows you to query the data from multiple data sources and write your own query statements, similar to what we did in the Power BI desktop. There is the PowerPivot add-in, which allows you to build formulas in your pivot table, build key performance indicators, and process more records than a standard Excel pivot table is able to handle. And then finally, there's the PowerView add-in, which allows you to do data visualizations similar to what we did in the Power BI desktop. So with these add-ins, you do have the ability to create nice reports within Excel and publish them to your PWA Business Intelligence Reporting subsite. I've done a lot of work with customers on building reports, whether they're reports, scorecards, dashboards, and what I find is that most customers have a requirement to build reports giving insights on resource workloads, such as what's the utilization of resources, what's the demand going forward on new work that's been forecasted on generic resources, and comparing how much time is spent on a project to that which was originally estimated. There's also the continuous demand on getting status of projects. So the examples that I've given you for the BI reporting focus on getting the status of a portfolio of projects. We looked at looking at projects and comparing them to budget. There are many, many examples on comparing how the schedule is doing to the planned finish date, to the actual finish, the status on key milestones, deliverables, outstanding issues, and risks. Of course, building these reports does take some planning. A lot of my examples today relied on custom fields. So custom fields, whether it was summarizing my projects by who was the sponsor, what was the project funding, those are all custom fields that I built into my database, populated all my projects with the appropriate metadata, then plan my connections to include those custom fields, and then build my report. So let's spend our last 10 minutes that we have together with some questions. We'll open it up for Q&A. You can put your questions in the chat window of the Google Hangouts, and we will go through and address those as they come in. So I'd like to thank you for attending, and I hope you learned something new.